Look, let's a wider scope. What are we working with here when we start talking this way? Think of Wallace Stevens, since we want to talk about poetry also. Wallace Stevens,
okay.
the supreme fiction. There is this notion of the supreme fiction that allows us to create fictions. It must be abstract. It must change. It must give what? Pleasure. Everything's a fiction. But it has a shelf life. Each one of these things has a shelf life before it's turned into a cliche. In other words, and what makes it a cliche? People force the one meaning of it. So then coming in and casuistically stretching something is to reanimate, let's say, something that is just dead and to add new life to it. So it's an inventional way of thinking. And now someone who is totally obsessive and not given to hysterical flights of things, well, that's wrong. You're absolutely wrong about that. Okay? And let me tell you why you're wrong. And with such assurance that they all of a sudden think that they have, this party line to a god. Okay, the god, rather. The thing about polytheism and paganism is what? Multiple gods. And they didn't get along very well, did they? And where did human beings often find themselves? Caught in arguments between the gods. Okay. Look what happened to Tiresias.
Oh, yeah.
He got caught between a male god and a female god, and the question was who enjoys sex more, males or females? He said males. And the female, what was the name of the female god? Aphrodite, I think.
The goddess of love?
It could be, well, that would be, I try to say Eros, that's not, okay. And so he is struck blind by her. And what does the male god do? Make him a seer. Okay. But he was also a hermaphrodite.
Yes.
So, think of, listen, I apologize, okay, but I'm not really apologizing. This is just how I jump from thought to thought. If it sounds crazy to you or you get lost, I don't want you lost. You can just stop and ask me, and then I will do, okay, there are 3 points here. This is the first point, the second point, the third point. Okay, is that okay?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Leap, baby, leap.
Where was it?
Something about Tiresias,
Hermaphrodite, the seer.
Before that, paganism and
Multiple
multi-gods.
gods to talk about.
Multiple gods, yeah. Where does Tiresias show up in what play? What major play?
Shakespeare's.
I'm talking about Greek,
Oh.
the early ones.
Oedipus.
Oedipus, yeah. And what's his role in that?
The seer
Yeah.
in the beginning.
He knows.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he knows. And then who's the next person to find out?
Is it the person after Tiresias to find out?
It's Oedipus's mom,
Jocasta.
Jocasta. But the important thing is it's his mom who is his wife.
Yes. And there's no way around it.
Yeah, and she says, Oedipus, please don't pursue this anymore. The great Sherlock Holmes of the Greek, finds out, the detective finds out that he's the quote criminal, polluter. And he blurts it out. There it is. Why? How did he go wrong? Because once again, he thought he was the authority. He was given a riddle, and he came up with an answer to it. And that was to be the answer to it. It goes by 4, what kills by 2, what kills by 3. That, you know, and he, anthropos. What is it? But there are other ways to, I'm sorry.
They try to move him. So the forces that be try to move him so that prophecy doesn't occur. But and then no matter what, he still kills his father and marries his mother.
Yes.
Okay.
They tried everything in the world. It's as if there's a certain destination there. Right? He's fated. Okay.
Well, he inherits that need to control from his father, which is the...
He has to slay the father, yes. And you know, and the 3, you know, could be interpreted also the blind man with his cane. The blind man with his cane. And there's a mirror image in the Greek, you know, of the what's this critter here?
What?
I don't know.
I'm sorry?
Janus?
No, what is it? Who poses the riddle? The critter.
Sphinx.
It's a Sphinx, thank you. There's a mirror image between the two, and it has to do with the claws of the Sphinx and his swollen feet. And so he's looking, in a sense, he's looking into a mirror. Okay? He's suffering from a kind of narcissistic moment, thinking that he's the great interpreter. He's got the answer. So this is what this book is against. Okay, so we can say a great deal more about the table of contents. Look at the motto that it opens with from Nicomachean Ethics. Shit, we're out of time. The rule of the undetermined is itself undetermined. In other words, it's turtles all the way down. What's holding up the turtles? Well, it's just turtles all the way down. You can insert an elephant there, but you know, who's holding up the elephant? You get into an infinite regress. So undetermined is really, really, you know, just put a note there if you wish, page 26, take a look at that. It's everything is predicated on nothing. Not on something, but on nothing. What you will notice is that in his discussion of Aristotelian texts, he is using texts that are not in the Argonon. In other words, not those that are solid logic that go for truth. Okay? And they are, you know, the rhetoric, the dialectic, or what's called the topica. All these deal with opinion of some sort or another, the politics, and so on. Okay? Lyotard does not go to the analytics. He's not going to go there. Okay? But what's interesting about the quote is that it's talking about a rule. The rule of the undetermined is itself undetermined. This is an undetermined rule, in other words. But if you read this carefully, you can see that there's an equivocation in the statement. Let's use logic now. There is an equivocation. In other words, there's a change of meaning in the double use of undetermined. So there's a natural sort of casuistic stretching in the statement of it. Now, if there's an equivocation, you're supposed to fix it. To be able to say this with certainty, you have got to have a determination somewhere. A determinant. But you could say, the rule of the undetermined is itself undetermined, and that undetermined is itself undetermined, turtles all the way down. Okay. You can go on forever, but every time you say that, you create something that is somewhat new. Okay. So this reference to the Nicomachean Ethics is incredibly important because I think that the entire discussion is generated out of this statement. The interesting thing about this is that this discussion is that it parallels perfectly, almost perfectly, with Plato's dialogue, the Sophists. Do you know how that begins? How that dialogue begins? There's this discussion, and they're trying to find, someone to. Socrates is tired or whatever; he doesn't want to do it today. They want someone else to join in a dialectical exchange, a dialogue. Okay? And they see the stranger coming. It's a stranger. And I think it's just called the stranger, not the Eleatic stranger, which pops up in another dialogue, but it could very well be the same person. And so he's coming down the road, and they stop him saying, let's, we'd like to talk about the Sophists, and if you could, be, sort of a substitute for Socrates, that would be really cool. He says, well, the stranger says, really, as long as I can say what I want to say and not be bothered by some second person, in other words, turn the dialogue into a monologue, that's what I want to do. But, what we want is, we want you to, that's what the rhetoricians do. That's what the Sophists do. Okay? So we want you to, so he eventually agrees to do it with this person. And it ends up being, the stranger has by far more words than the other person who just sits there and goes, yes, 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 Masson, this kind of stuff all the way through. Though there's a little bit going on. But what it says, what it advances, what the stranger is saying. Now tell me, please, help me. This begins in the middle of a discussion. I'm going to talk about that in a minute, okay? But don't we have the same thing here between Lyotard and Tybalt? And who is Tybalt? Do you know who he is? A real person. Editor of L'Esprit and so on. But he doesn't say much, does he? He might slightly disagree or ask the question again so that Lyotard will have a chance to add more comments. But is it not the same here? And if it is the same, what in the world's going on? Is it a parody? Is it probably not a parody because he's more of a, quote, postmodernist, and I put that in quotes because he has a very different notion of what postmodernism is. Okay? Or is it, maybe it's a pastiche instead of a parody. A parody copies something that is real, an original. Okay? And since he has this quote here, there can be no originals. The rule of the end, everything is undetermined. Everything is just pastiche. Okay? The putting together of things and so on. But how are we supposed to read this right away? We've got this, well, aren't you doing the very damn thing that, the stranger was doing? And is that what you want to do? To be the authority? But how does it open up in the middle of a conversation? What does he say about that later? How does he enter the stage? As an addressee. Being addressed. And he speaks in as much as he has been addressed. We don't know what's been said here, though. Did he come from God? Or did it come from the addresser who's the ultimate stranger, speaking to Moses, or to Abraham and telling him what to do with Isaac? Okay. And in that particular situation, he would be obligated to take his son, take him and cut his throat and offer him to be obedient to this voice. Okay. And so, now all of this should not be strange if you've read it, because I'm giving examples from the book. Okay. But do you see how those might? I'm losing you. I can see by your eyes. You're just like drifting on. Okay. You're lost, right?
No, where are you going? What?
I'm trying to answer the question, why does he begin in medias res here? To use a poetic term. In the middle of a conversation. When it also echoes that of the Sophists. And he's talking about the Sophists all the way through. Okay? And the charge that is made against the Sophists by Plato, okay, or the stranger, Eleatic stranger, who's a mouth for Plato, is that they're hydra-headed. They believe this thing over here, and they believe it's contradiction. Okay. And see, it fits quite well with the notion I hesitate. I'm either the sophist or I am who's also a sophist. Or the generic or the specific. So